Thank you for joining us here. Before we begin today, I want to go over our standard safety briefing. Please familiarize yourself with the exits in the room, obviously the doors at the back that you came in. We also have exits behind me on either side. If there is an emergency, I will help direct you to the proper exit. The Maritime Security Dialogue is co-hosted by CSIS and the U.S. Naval Institute. We seek to highlight current thinking and future challenges facing the Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard. Our event today is the 10th and final Maritime Security Dialogue in the 2016 series, and both CSIS and USNI look forward to hosting our 2017 series when the new year begins. I also want to thank our sponsors for the Maritime Security Dialogue, Lockheed Martin and Huntington Ingalls Industry, for their support, which makes this series possible. Today's discussion is with Rear Admiral Christian Boris Becker. He is the PEO for C4I and PEO for Navy Space Systems. He has a lengthy resume and experience. I want to highlight just a few things. He has served as a program manager at the NRO for National Security Space Systems. He also served as the commander of Space and Naval Warfare Systems Command, Space Field Activity, as the chief engineer for the Integrated Strike Planning and Execution System Program Office, and is the lead communication systems engineer for National Security Space System. He was formerly the deputy PEO for Enterprise Information Systems, and he assumed his current role as PEO for C4I and Space Systems in July of 2013. And so without any further introductions, I want to bring up onto the stage Rear Admiral Becker. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison, for that kind introduction. And thank you to the Center for Strategic and International Studies and the United States Naval Institute, who have given us this comprehensive series focused on maritime security. It has been an impressive lineup of speakers, and I'm humbled to back cleanup behind those heavy hitters of naval leadership and maritime visionaries who have preceded me. CSIS and the Naval Institute enjoyed reputations second to none for taking on challenging topics and providing a forum for thought leaders to share views and perspectives. In a city with no shortage of intellectually curious and rigorous think tanks, CSIS stands out among the rest. And that is why it is my distinct honor and privilege to share my thoughts with you today about the role of space in our Navy and of our Navy in space, our history, our present, and our future. And I'd like to do that in context of our role across three areas: the mission, the technology, and our people. Earlier in this series, Senior Richardson spoke of our design for maintaining maritime superiority. You can read in the design they very clearly how fundamental space, and more broadly the electromagnetic spectrum, is to naval operations and our maritime security today and into the future. The design builds in a cooperative strategy for 21st century sea power, or C2, or CS21R. The design compels us to further advance and ingrain information warfare, expand the electromagnetic maneuver warfare concept to encompass all of information warfare, to include space and cyberspace. The strategy established the essential function of all domain access to ensure access and freedom of action in any domain: sea, air, land, space, and cyberspace, and the electromagnetic spectrum. In doing so, the CNO has made it very clear we are a Navy committed to applying space-based capabilities to provide the temporal and spatial superiority we need, from the sea floor to space and in cyberspace. The importance of space can be traced as a continued thread throughout naval doctrine and policy, from the design for maintaining maritime superiority to CS21R, back to Sea Power 21, and back to the maritime strategy, the first strategy document I recall reading as a young junior officer. Undoubtedly, that importance will continue. Space has been and will always be as integral to our mission as the sea itself. As an acquisition professional in the Navy, there are a few must-reads. Ian Toll's 6 Frigates tells the story of the first ships our Navy built in the early days of the 19th century and of our young nation. One of those ships just went into a CNO availability in Charlestown for maintenance and modernization, or at least maintenance period. At 219 years young, Constitution is a wonderful example of how the Navy has been a leader among the armed forces in applying space to the mission. The stars have been the source of our precision navigation for as long as we have been going to sea. In fact, as a midshipman, I learned to use a sextant to plot our position. As I recall, I was sufficiently skilled at determining local apparent noon so as to correctly plot us somewhere in the general vicinity of the coast of Florida, or maybe Tampa. The reason local apparent noon is so important is that time is key to determining longitude. If you're not familiar with why that is, I encourage you to pick up a book you can read on your next cross-country flight or metro ride, Longitude, by David Sobel. Yeah, thanks very much. By David Sobel. Just as Captain Preble would have relied upon and protected his chronometers and their accuracy, so too has our Navy sought to apply and protect our timekeeping to support navigation. It was the blending of time and space by a team at the Naval Research Laboratory that led to the concept and implementation of, in essence, space-based chronometers. Timation met an urgent need in support of sea-based strategic deterrence that could not be satisfied by other means. This was the beginning of the Global Positioning System, a capability that has transformed our world. Today, we are facing a different world condition, however, a condition that is driving us to seek both ways to secure our use of those critical signals, as well as new ways of using the stars and our own heavenly bodies, I'm talking about satellites, to deliver the information we need to keep time. It's not just our navigation that relies on peacetime or on precise time. It's fundamental to the operations of our cryptography, our networking, and for some, their golf game. It's the basis of the precision-guided weapons we have employed to such a profound effect. In fact, one would be hard-pressed to find a mission area that does not in some way depend on our capacity for delivering precision navigation and timing. And we accomplish that today, as we have for 221 years, by using space to our advantage. As the mission grows more complex and the threats multiply, there's a growing need to exploit technology to meet those threats and to do so at a faster pace than ever before. The Secretary of Defense recently addressed this forum, and the focus of his remarks was innovation. He spoke to the importance of innovation in his stand-up of DIUX, the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, to build bridges with startups and quickly adopt technologies. Important developments he cited were the use of microsatellites and advanced analytics, and leveraging the revolution in commercial space, critical in the transformation of how we use space-based tools to provide critical situational awareness to forces around the world, in addition to adding resiliency to our space-based architecture. Today, PO Space Systems has a project called the Naval Interferometric Star Tracker Experiment, or NISTEX, which will demonstrate a commercially developed interferometric payload with very low size, weight, and power to detect stars at unprecedented precision. Its primary purpose is to improve CubeSat and SmallSat attitude determination. We are partnering with the U.S. Naval Observatory in this project to also demonstrate celestial navigation, astrometry, and star catalog maintenance capabilities. This RDT technology is versatile and can be reused for various military and small satellite missions. Navigation is not the only mission where the Navy has led in the development of space-based technology and capabilities. In 1960, once again, the Naval Research Laboratory scientists, engineers, and program managers achieved a first that established Navy's role in meeting the mission from space. It was the submarine community who had the need. After World War II, the submarine force began expanding its role in collecting information, not just delivering distributed lethality. From their masts, they could see into the electromagnetic spectrum, but that sight was limited by physics and the height to which they were willing to raise their mast. What if we could raise the mast higher? Was the question they sought to answer. And that is just what they did. The Galactic Radiation and Background, or GRAB satellite, was our nation's first signals collection intelligence from space. Although others would follow and the mission would grow beyond the maritime, Navy continues to maintain leadership roles in the science, engineering, and program management of these critical mission areas. GRAB is what we today might refer to as a small sat, weighing about 25 pounds and measuring about the size of an oversized beach ball. Today, we are applying that same spirit of ingenuity and adaptability using nanosats or microsatellites, which weigh between 2 and 22 pounds and are about the size of a bread box. We have adapted this technology to meet the needs of particular users at very low cost and on short timelines. In the future, we will not only build and fly our own, but also reach out to the commercial sector to add to our resiliency and composability. We recently awarded a contract to a Silicon Valley company that has launched over 100 CubeSats with the intent to image every point of ground once a day. Unlike most other imaging satellites, they are not tasked by users, but instead point straight down and take as many pictures as possible. The contract was awarded under the Rapid Innovation Fund program in order to expand their system coverage to the littorals and select open ocean areas of interest. When the effort is complete in mid-2017, the Navy will have significantly increased access to imagery of key areas for naval operations. Leveraging this innovative commercial offering will enable PEO Space Systems to deliver increased access to imaging capability in less than a year and at significantly less cost than other solutions. Virtually every platform and every mission is dependent upon meteorology, ISR, communications or EW information that traverse tactical data links and military and commercial-based satellites. Turn your attention to two of the most amazing classes of ships our Navy will ever put to sea, the Ford class and the Columbia class. I may be biased as an aviator, but there's nothing like 90,000 tons and 5 acres of sovereign U.S. steel bringing tremendous capability to wherever it's needed. Similarly, our nation's sea-based strategic deterrence is part of our existential defense, our Navy's most critical mission. Without space, I leave you to answer that. When it comes to cutting-edge technology in space, the U.S. Navy is often the one sharpening the tip of the spear, but our true asymmetric advantage lies in our people. When President Kennedy declared that within the decade we would send an astronaut to the moon and return him safely, I wonder if he didn't harbor just a little bit of expectation and some amount of pride regarding the role of his fellow naval officers would play. The first astronaut was, I'm sure, confident in the ability of the Mercury mission to get him to space, but it was a real gut check to take that seat in anticipation of the safe return part. And when I heard Alan Shepard, a fighter pilot logging over 3,600 flight hours, many of them as a test pilot, speak at the Cradle of Naval Aviation, Pensacola, Florida, you could tell this was a naval officer of great courage and skill. Recently, I had the privilege of meeting Captain Christopher Cassidy, currently the chief of NASA's astronaut office. He has amassed 182 days in space, conducted 6 EVAs, and flew on both Shuttle Endeavour and the Russian Soyuz, the latter transporting him on a long-duration ISS mission during Expedition 35-36. He is looking forward to his return to the International Space Station. Before he was an astronaut, Captain Cassidy spent 10 years in SEAL teams. He earned 2 Bronze Stars along the way. Our people, our heritage, and our future in space. When Navy committed to raising the mast, the submarine community sent great leaders and visionaries to get it done. Admiral Eugene B. Lucky Flucky earned 4 Navy Crosses and the Medal of Honor while he was the commanding officer of USS Barb during World War II. I was able to meet him at the National Reconnaissance Office because of what he accomplished delivering vital intelligence and operational information to his beloved fleet. Today, we have great space cadre professionals following in his footsteps. Leaders like Commander Pete Sheehy, the first naval officer to win the esteemed National Space Club's General Bernard Schriever Award for excellence in military space. Pete was recognized for his ability to efficiently integrate multiple disciplines and was instrumental in the Navy space team successfully launching 2 MUOS satellites into geosynchronous orbit in less than 8 months, a first for Navy communication satellites. MUOS is bringing a game-changing technology to the joint warfighter with a global wideband co-division multiple access, or WCDMA, architecture. It's a cell phone network with towers at 22,000 miles. Our people, our heritage, and our future in space. Those who operate in space, those who acquire space-based capabilities, they are expanding our Navy's ability to meet the mission, because that's what it's all about. For the mission of precision navigation and surveying accomplished by Lieutenant John Wilkes, who departed from Hampton Roads and encircled the globe while on a mission to map the Antarctic coast in 1838, to Commander Gary Montalvo, CEO of USS North Carolina and winner of the 2016 Stockdale Award, their mission success relied on space, and Navy space professionals were there to ensure their success. Our people, our heritage, and our future. One final thought on our future in space. It's no accident that NCC 1701 is the USS Enterprise, or that she and her crew are led by Captain Kirk and Commander Spock. Just saying. Space-based capabilities underpin our economic and national security. Around the globe today, just as it was yesterday, and as it will be tomorrow, Our Navy is building, using, and securing those capabilities. Navy, a heritage, a present, a future in space. Thank you, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Well, thank you again for joining us. I think you raised a lot of good issues in your remarks, and as a former Air Force officer, we often like to think that the Air Force really does space for the military, but it's important to remember that the Navy has a long and rich history in space and several major space programs. And I wanted to start by asking you about the MUOS program. The MUOS 5 satellite was launched, I guess it was a couple of months ago now. And of course, the apogee kick motor experienced an issue and stopped firing, and so it was not able to raise it to the final orbit like it was intended. Could you give us a quick update on the MUOS 5 satellite, and what do we know about what's happening to it and what's the future of it?
Sure, I'd be glad to. We've had some excellent work done by the team to understand how to characterize the condition of the satellite at that time and make sure that it was safe and stable. That was the first thing. And I go back to my training as an aviator: aviate, navigate, and communicate. So the first thing was to make sure we could aviate and control the satellite. The next was to figure out where we could navigate and how we could get there. And what we did was figure out how to use the existing onboard fuel for station keeping to propel us to an orbit that will provide us operational utility. It won't be the same orbit we intended. It won't be under the same conditions. We were able to achieve an orbit that is roughly geosynchronous with enough fuel to keep us in an operational condition. Great teamwork and a great understanding of the capabilities that we could bring to a situation to regain operational utility.
All right.
We've conducted the deployments, by the way, for the solar arrays. We've got the antennas out. So we've got the aviate, the navigate. We're going to start to communicate.
And so that satellite, it was intended to be an on-orbit spare, but now it is still in a condition where it'll be usable.
It is, we believe so. We still have to test out the communications payloads, and that'll be an ongoing process.
And does this present a good opportunity in the future to use something like an on-orbit servicing vehicle to reposition the satellite into its intended orbit, or after it drifts out of its orbit, which satellites are prone to do, to reposition it, given that it's going to have limited propulsion for the duration of the life?
Well, I think we need to look at all options. The good news is that right now there isn't an urgent condition. We're understanding more and more about the vehicle. We'll go through a test period to understand our capabilities with the comm systems and the payloads themselves, and then we'll have time.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing once you get in a stable condition. Next thing I wanted to ask you about is the mission of conducting maritime domain awareness. That's obviously important to the Navy. That's something that you can really leverage space capabilities to help do. What are your thoughts on using commercial systems to help conduct maritime domain awareness from space and other means?
I think we need to look at all sources of information, whether those are commercial, whether those are military architectures. We should look at every source of information, and in fact, that is where the community has gone. There's an office that is coordinating between the NRO and NGA on securing commercial imagery, a great partnership, and I think we as the Navy will benefit from that. We should look to all sources of information, whether from space or any other sources of open information.
Is this one area where the military has got to shift its mindset of, instead of looking at maritime domain awareness as systems that we buy, instead looking at it as just information service that we procure, and it may be through military systems, commercial or otherwise, but focus on buying it as a service?
Well, I'll answer maybe a little bit different way. Someone, I know you're out there because I heard you, somebody has in their pocket something that the old days we'd call a phone. Is that a phone? Or is it a source of information? A source of all sorts of information. So too, when we look at the mission of maritime domain awareness, we're looking for information, not necessarily a particular kind. I don't need to have an image. I don't necessarily need to have some sort of a reporting information. The commander needs to know what the commander needs to know, and the source of that information should become interesting, but not necessarily relevant to the knowledge that the commander needs to execute command and control and commander's intent.
Okay. Last question before I open it up for questions from the audience. But looking at space systems overall in the military, there's a long and rich history of cost overruns and schedule delays and failed programs. But the Navy actually stands out as doing a particularly good job of managing its space programs. So I wonder, what advice would you have from a Navy perspective on managing space programs? Of, what are the things that help lead to success in a program management? Because space systems are very complex. There's a lot of risk in development, but the MUOS program actually, in terms of cost and schedule, it stayed pretty close to its original estimates.
Space is hard. Satellites are hard to build and to fly and to keep flying. It's not like anything else where you can go and fix it. Well, I guess we've demonstrated that too, but generally not.
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult to make sure that you've got everything tested and ready to go. However, sometimes you may find that things occur that you didn't plan for, or that in the design was some sort of a surprise, or occasionally it's the simple things to get you. Simple things like paint or glue, although we use fancier terms than that. But space is difficult. And that's why I think you see sometimes expectations of what we are able to achieve, and then the challenge of what it takes to achieve that not necessarily being aligned. In the Navy, I think we've had great experience, not only inside the lifelines of the Navy, but working in a joint partnership. And working with organizations like the National Reconnaissance Office. We have a long history of working together, both at the NRO and then in our own world. Excuse me. And building on that, I think, is what you see today of the success of programs like MUOS, which has had its challenges.
Okay. So with that, I want to open it up, see if there are any questions from the audience. So please raise your hand. We'll bring a microphone over to you if you have a question. Got one over.
Thank you. Pete Daly, Naval Institute. One of the things that's been evolving is the funding of satellites, between the military side, the MIP, and the national side. And are you satisfied that the visibility of space and the contribution of space systems has the right emphasis and focus with operators? And the second part of that question is, are we sharing enough with our operators to get the true value and return from space?
Great question. And I kind of know if pardon me if it's a little bit of a long-winded answer, because there are multi-tiers to that. I'll start where you finished, with the operator, because it does start and end with the operator and with the mission. At times in the past, operators have been very aware and with keen understanding and counsel on the specifics of the capabilities that the national architecture and the Defense Department's architecture can deliver from space. And that's been important, because then you, as Cy Sims used to say, an educated consumer can be your best customer. But I think we're moving to a time where, as I said earlier, the specific capabilities, the specific systems, knowledge of those particular things should be of interest, but not compellingly relevant to the commander, who should demand the information at the time, at the place, and in the accuracy that they need to execute their mission. And then that signal should go to the community to be able to provide that service, whether that's intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance information or communications. It needs to be there, it needs to be ready, it needs to be available, and I dare say ubiquitous. Now, how does that translate to what the building does? How does that translate to building a program, and then by programming with a capital P, and executing that program? I think if you read through the document, the Design for Maintaining Maritime Superiority, I think if you read through the other documents I mentioned earlier, it becomes clear and apparent that the CNO understands the need for space in order to support naval operations. He understands the need to control that environment in the way that we have controlled other environments, and the criticality to all naval operations of being able to operate with systems that rely on capabilities that either traverse or are based in space. To that end, I think we'll see the overall program build out towards the demand signal that pulls those capabilities and maintains our ability to leverage those systems, whether they're Navy systems or not Navy systems, because it's important at the end game that the commander has access. And sometimes access is provided by Navy systems, though themselves not space-based. They are the conduits to provide that information, and those are just as critical. So, Admiral, I think the short version is that, yes, our Navy leaders understand the capability. The operators are going to be demanding customers, but it is still incumbent upon the space cadre, operators and acquisition professionals, to keep that information current, to educate our leaders, to find our officers and our sailors as they go through their own education and training, and make sure they understand that. So when Lieutenant Jones goes through and becomes the department head, and then becomes the squadron skipper, and then becomes the CO of a carrier, and then moves on to be the strike group commander, and then commands that fleet, all along they've understood how space-based capabilities have enabled their mission success.
You're welcome. Other questions? Over here.
Otto Kreischer with Sea Power Magazine. Obviously, a great deal of emphasis these days on the concern that the potential adversaries can affect our use of space assets. What's the Navy doing as far as providing survivability, versatility, or alternatives for our space assets, both precision navigation and timing and communications?
Again, if you don't mind, sir, I'll go to the back end of your question first. It is incumbent upon us to seek redundancy and resiliency in any warfare area, whether it's communications or, as I said, ISR. Just as we would have redundant systems in an airplane, we have to have redundant systems for providing the information that a commander needs to execute their mission. And so from a communications perspective, as the program executive officer for C4I, one of those C's being communications, I'm very interested in how we provide resiliency to ships at sea for communications, whether that's through multiple accesses to satellite communications, both commercial and military, or other use of the RF spectrum to provide connectivity. You know, once upon a time, it was HF and only HF. Well, I go back to my example of the cell phone. I'm just looking for communications. And whether that's through social media or the internet or an actual phone call, which is so 1990s apparently, we just want that information. And that's what we're developing, is multiple paths to provide resilient communications and precision navigation and timing, because we have to have that resiliency. We have to have those systems able to provide us operations throughout a continuity of any sorts of challenges we might face.
Let's see. Another question back here at the back.
Sir Bill Hamblett from the Naval Institute. A question about how our allies fit into the capabilities that we're building and fielding for space systems.
Our allies are an integral part of our space-based capabilities in multiple ways. Today, our UHF system provides narrowband UHF communications to a variety of our mission partners and allies and friends. And I see that partnership continuing in a variety of ways. We will exercise, we will sail, we will execute the mission in partnership with our allies as we have, well, for as long as I've been wearing the uniform. And that will require communications. That will require sharing information. And as part of that, we need to be able to access and share information that comes from space and operates in space. And today, if you were to go to any of our joint facilities that rely on space or manage space-based capabilities, you may see members of our allies operating side by side with U.S. personnel. That partnership will continue. It's strong today, and it'll be stronger going into the future.
Back there.
Thank you. My name is Ben Hirschman. I'm from Johns Hopkins CSIS. And I wanted to ask, what are the strategic issues surrounding space competition with foreign militaries that keep you up at night, and what are the capabilities we need to improve upon?
I'd start with the capabilities that we need to improve upon, focusing, as I said earlier, on resiliency. We have a tremendous industry in the United States which has delivered tremendous capability and continues to do so. But so does the commercial sector. As we talked earlier, we as a department are exploring and continue to explore and consume information that comes from the commercial sector from space-based assets. And so as we look across the spectrum of missions that we need to execute, we continue to look towards adding that resiliency that comes with a broad series of inputs for that information. With regard to potential contention or with space and space architectures, I think I'd look to General Hyten and understand what General Hyten's perspective of how he, as the Space Command commander and now moving to the Strategic Command, plans to maintain our nation's capabilities in space. And I think he's moving out on that very quickly, and in partnership with the department, creating organizations that you can, such as the JIXPOC and others, and you see that shift in how we as a nation are approaching our operations in space.
So just to follow up on that a bit, so you see leveraging commercial space systems is a way to kind of enhance mission resiliency for the Navy and for military space in general?
Well, just in general, and even today, this very day, if I want to look for access for information such as imagery information, if I have certain assets that can provide the kinds of general information I need, from which I can then relieve other assets to provide other information, why would I not choose to support that and expand my capability?
All right. Question up front here.
Sure. Thank you. John Harper with National Defense Magazine. Admiral, what challenges or hurdles are you dealing with in terms of your dealings with industry to try to bring on the capabilities that you're looking for, or just in terms of the acquisition process in general, you know, the speed of that and some of the other requirements that you face?
Well, I'd turn that question around and ask industry, what's hard about dealing with us? And I'm sure General Armour would give me some very good answers to that.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to ask that.
You've heard from many people talk about the speed of acquisition and how acquisition is not effective, it's not efficient. There have been many opinions about that status and root cause, et cetera. And there are folks that are looking at how we could evolve our acquisition processes to get at some of those inefficiencies. I think when I look to industry, I need to look to industry to be upfront when we talk about what the risks are, to be upfront about what the technical hurdles are, and to be clear about how we're going to manage those risks. In the past, there may have been times where we were optimistic about what could be achieved. I'd prefer to be cautiously not pessimistic as I approach estimates. And perhaps that's too many years as a program manager, and perhaps thinking back to my days as an electronic attack aviator, where hope was not really an effective strategy when flying through the goo trying to find a boat. You wanted to rely on data. And therefore, as we look towards what might come to us as new requirements, and therefore new opportunities for industry to meet those requirements, I would look for the cautiously not pessimistic answer to our requirements. Now, having said that, I think it's very important that we, the government, engage and stay engaged with industry along the way as we try to sort out exactly what it is that we're trying to achieve. Because industry has a voice that we need to hear in that process. Industry has a voice that we need to hear as we refine what those requirements are. And it's very clear that those comm pipes have got to stay open right up until the point where we've received proposals back and then the appropriate guidelines take over. So I say two things. Maintaining a true and accurate estimate of the difficulty of what we face and helping us to keep those open comms along the way.
So let's go up here in the front with a question.
Matt Moffat, Boeing Company. Admiral, thanks so much for being concerned about my golf game. I need all the help I can get. In the question realm, Admiral Manazar's been talking quite a bit about a concept that's basically based on NIFCA. Now, you work with the N26 primarily, but it appears to me that the N9 organization, the requirements that he represents, are playing more and more in this realm. Can you talk about that growing relationship? And then, relative to NIFCA, can you talk about the demand for data movement through that network and obviously up into space and back? And are you properly equipped with a plan that gets you there to be able to move that data to the extent that it needs to be moved?
And I'm going to ask you to define some of those acronyms and organizations for the audience here.
Okay, I guess we should start with Boeing Company. It's a major defense company.
I've heard of them.
NIFCA is the Naval Integrated Fires Counter-Air. We forgot a C there, fire control counter-air, which is a concept that brings together multiple platforms to execute a particular mission. I think that has been a tremendous success because it crossed across programs, which then had a joint answer to a mission need, and bringing that joint answer across programs and resource officers and perhaps even resource sponsors to the leadership at the secretary level and at the service chiefs level has been powerful and has demonstrated that when we work together, we can succeed. What's the saying? All of us is smarter than one of us. That's been a great path to follow. And I think what we'll see with N9, N9 being the resource sponsor for Navy platforms, we'll see a growing application of that mindset and that strategy to multiple mission areas. Now, the next step is, if that's college level work, the graduate level work, perhaps even the doctorate level work, will be at the far left of that kill chain. And in going back to the requirements conversation, putting in place the requirements process that bakes in that interoperability, that bakes in the demand signal for ubiquity of data, so that data hitting an RF aperture and then moving through that aperture to an analog to digital converter, from RF to digital, becomes just that, a digital resource. And today, where we have processors that will pick up the resource and apply it to a particular mission area as a vertical value chain, if you will, from that antenna to processor to action, let's disaggregate that and make the data what we value and move that around to meet different missions. If we can accomplish that, then NIFCA becomes a simple problem of, well, some math and some physics, but so it's not that simple after all. But it's more of a problem than of operational TTPs and training, et cetera, because we've baked in early that ability to move information amongst sensors, amongst resources, to achieve the desired effect. And I think that what you'll see with N9 and N26, N26 being the OPNAV sponsor for information warfare, is a very close bond, getting even closer as we look towards how we build the Navy of tomorrow.
And so I want to pick up on something, a recurring theme that keeps coming up here is, talking about space systems and C4I, it is more and more about the data. And all of the systems we're talking about, they are merely, systems that are used to collect the data, process the data, transmit the data. If so much of it in the future, now and going into the future, is about the data, how worried are you about cybersecurity threats? And what steps do we need to be taking to make our systems more secure?
I'll change your word from worried to aware. Worried implies not being able to have an effect. We are very aware of the necessity to protect our information, to protect our data, in much the same way that we're very aware of keeping the water out of the people tank for a submarine. We've got to make sure that cybersecurity is built in to everything that we deliver. Those concerns, that aspect of the mission, was not very prevalent when many of these systems were designed. Just as if a decade or so ago, I asked here who had ever heard of or studied data science, there might be a hand up, but probably not. And yet today, data science is, that is the cutting edge of technology. So how do we catch up? I think we do that, we do that with the very dedicated, capable, and talented members of our workforce who are day in and day out proving that we can secure the information we need to secure and that we can design a future that has that capability, that has that as part of our requirements baked into the systems of tomorrow.
We have a question up front here.
Hi, Admiral. Lee Hudson with Inside the Navy. Could you please give us an update on the MUOS ground stations and waveform testing, specifically on the ground station in Sicily, and when will the waveform be certified by the NSA?
The ground station in Nishemi is operational. We've come through some challenges with working with the local government there. They had some concerns, and they used their legal process to vet those concerns, and they used their court system to process that, and we have now received permission to continue to operate the ground station at Nishemi. A great partnership there with the State Department, the Embassy, and the Ministry of Defense, and the government of Italy. We are now operational. With regard to NSA certification of the waveform, we are testing right now. We are in early combatant commander use, and we have been since this summer, using the MUOS waveform. We're looking forward to continued certification of terminals that will then be able to be used in this period of early combatant commander use.
And so a related question there, how is work on the terminals coming that will be able to use the new MUOS waveform? I know a lot of that is outside the Navy, it's in the Army. Are we going to have a good user base of MUOS terminals?
Well, I think so, and I can't comment to the specifics today of the Army's program for acquiring terminals, but they are well underway. There are other opportunities. Industry has leaned forward and provided terminals that the department could acquire that can be MUOS capable, MUOS ready. We are progressing with the digital modular radio in the Navy as part of the program underneath POC4I that will be our MUOS capable radio on ships and submarines. We're also looking at the radios that our Expeditionary Combat Command sailors will carry that will also be MUOS capable. So we're moving along and delivering terminals that will be MUOS capable.
Question back here.
Hi, I'm Philip Swartz with Space News. I was wondering what mission areas and operations would allow for cooperation with the Air Force's space assets, even to the point of perhaps using the same systems and satellites, and what areas do you need specifically naval capabilities?
Well, one of the fundamental nature or aspects of space is that it is global, and we are a global force. When we deploy, we don't deploy strictly as the Navy or strictly as the Air Force. We support a Joint Task Force commander. We support a combatant commander, which means by the very nature of our operations, we are joint. And in doing so, we are every day operating jointly with our Air Force counterparts, whether it's the Air Force flying, excuse me, the global positioning satellite systems that I talked about earlier, upon which we rely for everything, precision navigation and timing, or our Navy Operations Center flying MUOS, which is delivering today legacy UHF narrowband communications capabilities to Air Force personnel worldwide, flown by naval civilians and officers. We are already operating jointly. And then there are places where we work together. In fact, I have naval personnel embedded at the Space and Missile Center, System Center at Los Angeles Air Force Base. I haven't quite yet got any of those Air Force folks down to San Diego, but I'll work on it.
Question up front.
Good morning, Admiral. Nevin Carr from Leidos. For a while, we were hearing a lot about task force netted Navy. Now, this kind of overlaps what you're talking about. Some does, some doesn't. But can you talk a little about where that has gone? And I mean, lately we haven't heard so much, but I know there was a report out. So can you talk about the implications from whatever came out of task force netted Navy for how you're going to move data around, how you're going to protect it, including up and down, but other ways as well?
First, I mentioned that you probably haven't heard much about Task Force Navy because there's no longer a task force. That's the nature of a task force. It's a temporary organization that's mission purpose and mission tasked and mission organized, and they've accomplished their mission. What you'll see from Task Force Navy is, as I mentioned earlier, the linkage, the tighter linkage between the platforms, weapons, and sensors programs and the information warfare programs to deliver mission capability, cutting across program or lines of a program of record lines in ways that perhaps we haven't done before. And while we've been able to conduct the difficult technical systems engineering with great success in areas like NIFCA, what Task Force Netted Navy has shown us is the imperative to move that integration left, to move that integration from a post-delivery systems engineering effort to a pre-acquisition systems engineering effort, and to make sure that those interfaces are known so that data can move effectively across multiple interfaces in ways that perhaps we have not considered before. Rather than having systems 1 through N and then having N-to-N minus 1 interfaces across each one and identifying those, how much better to have a standard operating architecture with open standards that allow you to then integrate your application onto that computing device in such a way that all you have to do is does that sound familiar to anybody here? Right, that's where we need to go, to disaggregate the systems and the applications from the platforms so that we can move those data around seamlessly. Task Force Netted Navy showed the imperative to move in that direction.
Question here.
Morning, Admiral. Silas on, OD9 Military Fellow. You mentioned small SATs, CubeSats, and also advanced analytics. Can you expand on your views on those different topic areas and how they might impact the future of space and maritime domain awareness?
Certainly. Nanosats and small sats. For those not familiar, nanosats or CubeSats are literally about that big. And as they are made of, well, cubes, You can create a nanosat that's a 3-unit or 3U, 6U. You can imagine the combinations until it gets to be a small sat, and maybe not so much of a nanosat. That is exciting technology, and while we in the department, and certainly the Navy, as well as the other services, have been exploring that, we're not alone. Industry has found that to be very useful because it provides a way to rapidly innovate on a production timeline and a production scale that you can use to evolve capability. Where you are providing or producing large assets with long intervals in between, you're going to be very careful and specific about what capabilities go into that and managing that, and that's appropriate. When you have a factory that's pushing out nanosats on a production line, you can, and those nanosats themselves have limited life because they're in low Earth orbit and will eventually decay. You are by nature going to evolve those capabilities along the way. And that's a very exciting technology, both for the commercial sector as well as for our needs. Another aspect of operating with small sats and nanosats that I find very exciting is the people, because it provides us an opportunity to reach out into academia, to reach out into our own graduate schools, and to bring in excited scientists and engineers who want to apply their talents to our mission, at the same time working on cutting-edge capabilities. Now, once you have the nanosat, it's not just about flying the nanosat, it's about doing something in space that's different, which means you're going to have a sensor of some sort, whether it's a communication capability or something else, that's going to create data. It's going to create a lot of data. And that's where I come back to the data science and the importance of data science. If we can truly move to an architecture where my sensors are sensing the environment in the way that they are tuned, for which they're designed, but then the data that they provide become available in an unstructured format to any other consumer, well, then I can start to put those things together in ways I didn't think possible before. I can mine those data for value in ways I couldn't possibly have done before. And again, we are not the leaders in this right now. I would ask you to reference the ads that pop up next to your web email accounts. We can harvest and learn a lot and apply those same capabilities to our mission needs.
And retail companies are quite effective at mining our own personal data to advertise to us.
Indeed.
All right. Are other questions from the audience? I see a hand back here.
Good morning, Laura Delgado Lopez with Harris Corporation. I wonder if you can comment on the role of satellites in filling maritime domain awareness needs in the changing Arctic. Thank you.
We found that, well, not to brag a little bit about MUOS, but to brag a little bit about MUOS, we found that a system that was designed to meet communication needs at average latitudes for geosynchronous satellites actually can provide capability in the northern and southern latitudes. And in fact, we've demonstrated that capability with a MUOS terminal on the Coast Guard cutter Healy and also at the ice station that Navy established last year in the Arctic. That was pretty far north. Now, the physics limit as you go further north that the hours per day that you have those accesses, but we have access, and we've proven the capability. And in fact, we've done so at the Antarctic as well in an aircraft. What does that mean for us? Well, it means that as we expand our capability, we have the opportunity to work with other partners to provide UHF communications in northern latitudes. And certainly, NORAD and U.S. Northern Command are very interested in what that could mean for our operations with Canada and our joint operations in northern latitudes. So I see from a communications perspective, growing capability.
And so we're almost out of time here. I wanted to take the prerogative to ask the final question today. I want you to think far, far into the future. Well after you're retired, living, maybe on the beach somewhere, enjoying things. 20, 30, 40 years from now, what do you see? What do you see as the future for how space is organized within the military? Because we've talked a lot today that space is inherently joint. The Navy has its space systems, but they are a resource for the joint warfighter, as well as Air Force, NRO. A lot of different components that go into overall military space organization. Where do you think we should be headed in the very long term? And in particular, do you think maybe 50 years from now that we will need to stand up a separate service, a space service?
Well, I think in 2264 we have the USS Enterprise. That's a great question, and I don't have an answer. I know that very informed, experienced, and knowledgeable folks at the level of Dr. Hamry, Admiral Ellis, Mr. Marty Fega, former director of the NRO, have been considering this and providing their expertise and opinion to folks through reports and with Congress. That is a difficult question with which to wrestle. I can tell you what I've seen that's been successful so far. In our Navy, we have a heritage of engineers and scientists and program managers who have delivered on capability, and will continue to do so. We're not unique, but we have a demonstrated track record, and I think that continues. I've also seen great success at the National Reconnaissance Office, where we had a wonderful organization of diverse backgrounds and skills, organizations, even to the point where the great balance between some service counterparts who enter into the acquisition field as officers, as their career field, combined with officers from the Navy that start out as aviators or submarine or surface ship officers and then move into acquisition. Bringing those two skill sets together, along with our civilian cadre, we're going to have that well into the future. And it always comes down to the people. Whatever the organization is, however we're organized, it will always come down to the people. People who are dedicated to meeting the mission. People will apply everything they have to meet that mission. We just need to get out of their way.
All right. And with that, I'll ask you to please join me in thanking Admiral Becker for joining us here today.
Thank you.